Julia, Nestlé is one of those very large, diversified international food companies that, when it comes to annual results, as we saw this morning, investors can get drowned in a blizzard of detail. What was the fundamental sort of point about Nestlé's numbers this morning that saw the share price sort of, I think it was down 3% on the day so far?
Well, I mean, overall, earnings weren't that bad. So organic sales growth was up about 6% and earnings per share was up about 12%. Looking on a constant currency basis, earnings weren't as good. But overall, I mean, the fundamentals weren't that bad. Their dividend went up as well. Still, we're looking at a sort of 60% payout ratio. So those are the sort of top line figures.
Yeah, and I think that Nestlé is one of those companies that consistently generates the kinds of returns that just keep the momentum going and keep the dividend rising, keep revenue rising, keep profits rising, and obviously the share price keeps rising too. I think that it's in that kind of sweet spot with a few others. I'm thinking of Unilever, say, as a competitor.
Well, as a comparable, I'd say, yeah, Unilever or Danone, also very similar. But if you look at Nestlé, it's much more diversified. So it's a food group just like Danone, but it's got, I mean, a maximum of a fifth of its sales from one area, whereas Danone has 60% of its sales from dairy. So I think, and looking at things like return on capital, then it's better. I mean, they have better metrics for Nestlé.
Absolutely, and I think that the diversification clearly, as a sort of fundamental bottom line, is really works in Nestlé's favour. Now that Europe is such a slow market, it can leverage in Asia and Latin America.
Well, it can definitely, and that's the thing. But unfortunately, this time around, earnings growth in Asia wasn't as strong as it has been, and so that got investors worried this time. But as you point out, because they're so diversified, it doesn't matter so much that the earnings growth wasn't quite as strong as expected.
Absolutely. I suppose the real question about Nestlé is what it's going to do with its L'Oréal stake. I mean, this is a very big chunk of its asset base and of its balance sheet, and it's just sitting there. There's a lock-up agreement that expires next year. I think everybody is starting to ask, what's it going to do with the L'Oréal stake? Is it going to buy L'Oréal or sell L'Oréal? And if it sells, what does it do with the money?
Well, this is the big question. And yes, it's sitting on that stake. As you say, the lock-up period's up next year. They're keeping very tight-lipped on what they're going to do with it, though. So I think there'll be no clarity on what will happen with that stake, unfortunately, until next year, which is just leaving for a lot of speculation.
Yeah, and I think that is clearly the big question about Nestlé. Otherwise, one can get lost in the sort of blizzard of detail and in a company that probably makes more products than most others. So I think that next year we'll definitely find out what Nestlé intends to do with this L'Oréal stake. Thanks, Julia.